So our first lesson in Unit 2 is solving equations. So we're going to start by distributing the 4 into the parentheses so that we have 5x, and then we'll take 4 times x and 4 times the negative 8. Equals 16 minus x. We'll combine our like terms, so we'll have an x, and when I put a subtraction sign there, that should be a plus x. We'll have 9x minus 32 equals 16 minus x. We'll add this x over here so we can get those like terms together. And at the same time, I'll also add the 32 to the other side. So we have 10x equals 48. Divide both sides by 10. So x equals 4.8. As you're watching this video, I would recommend that you go ahead and try the second equation by yourself and then check and see if you did it right. So push pause. Work out number 2 and then play the video and see if you did all the steps correctly. Hopefully I'll do it right this time also. All right, so we're going to take negative 3 and multiply it into the parentheses. So 4 and then negative 3 times 5 is negative 15 or minus 15. Negative 3 times a negative 2 is a positive 6x. We'll do the same thing on this side. Take the 4 into the parentheses. So we have 4x minus 20. So then again, we'll work on combining like terms. So 4 minus 15 is negative 11. And when you're combining things, simplifying an equation, there's more than one correct way to do it. So if you did yours differently than how I'm simplifying mine, that's okay, as long as we get the same answer at the end. All right, so I always like to get my variables on the same side first. So we have 2x, but then at the same time, I can also add that 11x. So we have 2x equals negative 4, divide both sides by 2, x equals negative 2. Now when you're solving equations, one thing you can also do is substitute your answer back into the original equation to make sure both sides are equal, and then you know you solved it correctly. All right, so number 3, go ahead and write that down and then push pause and then try to solve it and then come back to the video and see if you got it right. So again, we'll start by distributing. We have negative 6 times 4x for negative 24x, and negative 6 times 5 equals negative 30. On this side, there's nothing to distribute, so we can go ahead and just combine like terms, our negative 30x and our 6x, to get negative 24x minus 40. Always want to get my variables together first, so I'm going to add 24x to both sides. When I do that, negative 24x and 24x equals 0. I can add 30 over here, or I can just leave it as negative 30 equals negative 40. Since that is a false statement, negative 30 does not equal negative 40, then I would say no solution. That means that there are no numbers that I can substitute in for x in that original equation that would make it come out to be true. Now, if you added that negative 30 over, you would have a 0 on the left side, and you would have a negative 10 on the right. That still doesn't equal each other. So you would still get no solution if you had done that. And there are other varieties as well. No matter how you solve it, you're going to end up with no solution. All right, let's take a look at number 4. Again, I'd like for you to write it down and try it, and then come back and make sure you did it correctly. We're going to start by distributing the negative 2. So we have negative 8x minus 10 equals negative 3. Now, even though there's not a number here, when there's a negative, you have to distribute that negative to both of those terms. So we have a negative 8x and a negative 7. get my variables together first, so I'm going to add 8x to the other side. Again, that leaves us with 0, so we have negative 10 equals, looks like a negative 10. Negative 10 does equal negative 10. So what that means is that any number I put in for x is going to work in that equation. So we say all real numbers will work. Any number you can come up with, you substitute that in and you'll make that equation true. All right, let's try it with fractions. Again, some of us don't like fractions, but they're really not that bad. Go ahead and try it and then come back and see if you got it right. We'll start by distributing 1/4 times x and 1/4 times 4. So we have 1/4 x plus, if you take, without your calculator, the numerators, 1 times 4, that gives you 4, divided by 4 is 1. Minus 5 equals, distribute, 1/3 times x is 1/3 x. Then we'll do the same thing, 1 times 6, divided by 3, so we get a negative 2. All right, so then we have to combine some like terms. We have to subtract or add, or subtract our 1/3 x or our 1/4 x to get them together. Doesn't matter which way you go. A lot of people like to move to the left, so we can do that, minus 1/3 x on this side. Now those aren't as easy to combine together because we have to have like terms in order to do that. So a couple different ways you can go about it. You can find a common denominator, or let me show you a little bit more. If we just left it as 1/4 x minus 1/3 x, get these together, 1 minus 5 is a negative 4. It would equal a negative 2. And then we can add that negative 4 over, so we have 1/4 x minus 1/3 x equals, adding 4, we get a positive 2. So you still have those, so we can, like I said, we get a common denominator, or you can multiply by the LCD. So LCD, least common denominator, what number do both 4 and 3 multiply into? What are they factors of? Well, both 4 and 3 multiply into 12. So what you can do is you can multiply every single term by 12. You multiply this by 12, this by 12, and this by 12. You'll eliminate all of the fractions. So 1/4 times 12 is 3x. That's 12 divided by 4. Negative 1/3 times 12 is 4x. 12 divided by negative 3. And 2 times 12 is 24. 3x minus 4x is negative 1x. And then to get the x by itself, divide by negative 1, so x equals negative 24. Now, if instead you got the common denominator, that's fine too. We'll work through problems later doing it that way as well. All right, 2 more. Starting with number 6. Number 6 is another fraction problem. And the reason why I showed you that LCD method on number 5 is because it's really handy on problems like number 6 that are kind of beyond just typical fractions that have variables in them as well. So if we can find an LCD for our denominators here, so a number that both 5 and 4 can divide evenly into, see if you can come up with that. And then after you get that number, you're going to multiply all the terms by that number. So our LCD in this case is 20. So we're going to multiply this first fraction by 20, the second fraction by 20, and the 8 by 20. Now, when we go and multiply that first fraction by 20, there's multiple ways to do that. But essentially we're multiplying the numerator. So we have to multiply the x and the 4. So we'd have 20x plus 80 plus another 20x equals 160. Now after you multiply by the LCD, you might be able to simplify a little bit. So if we divide both of those by 5, because that's what our 5 was from that original, we'd have 4x plus 16, multiply or divide this by 4, we'd have 5x, and now we don't have any more fractions. And again, there's lots of ways to do that. Maybe I'll even show you a different way on the next one. So again, from here, we'll just solve it out, combine your like terms, subtract values to the other side. So we're gonna subtract 16. We get 9x equals 144, and then x equals 16. All right, last one. I would like for you to write it down and give it a shot using that LCD. And then come back and see how you did. We need a number that all 3 of these divide evenly into. So that LCD would be 6. They all divide evenly into 6. So we want the smallest number. So you might have picked 12. Yeah, they all do go into 12, but 12 is not the smallest one that they all go into. So we always want the smallest one. Okay, so now we're going to multiply each one of these by that LCD. So I told you earlier that there was more than one way to do that. Before we multiplied the whole numerator and then we divided. Another way to do it is to divide first. So if I take 6 divided by 3, I get 2, and then I can multiply 2 times the numerator. So 2x plus 4. Or on this next one, 6 divided by 2 is 3. So I'm taking 3 times x. Here, 6 divided by 6 is 1, so I don't have to multiply the 5x times anything. So you can either multiply first and then divide, or you can divide first and then multiply, whichever makes the most sense to you. All right, so now we're going to combine our like terms. We have 5x plus 4 equals 5x. We need to get our variables together first. So we end up with 4 equals 0. Well, like we talked about before, anytime that you have 2 numbers set equal to each other that aren't equal, we say no solution. And that means that there is not a single number that will make that statement true. That's all for 1.1.